So a few days back, I talked about this live service video game, Splitgate 2, or as it's known now, Splitgate Arena Reloaded. I discussed how Splitgate 2 essentially unlaunched and relaunched and basically died a second time, given that player numbers surrounding the relaunch of Splitgate 2 are not looking particularly good. While complaints surrounding Splitgate 2 were addressed with Arena Reloaded, and it's seeing generally more positive reception than the original launch of Splitgate 2 did, it doesn't change the fact that a lot of people seem to have moved on, and the player numbers of Splitgate Arena Reloaded don't inspire a whole lot of confidence, indicating that this is a live service that will not be sustainable. It's free to play, but there are not enough players engaging with it for it to be able to recurrently monetize at a level that will allow this game to sustain itself. And so yeah, looking at Steam charts, you'll see that the all-time peak, while decent, really dropped off quite quickly, and now we're at a point where even after the relaunch, the game only peaked at, a little less than 2,300 players, and we're sitting in the mid to high triple digits right now when it comes to player numbers, with the 24-hour peak as of right now kind of having reached low quadruple digits, but still not enough players, nowhere near enough players for this free-to-play live service to be sustainable. And not to mention that Splitgate sequel managed to perform worse than the first game. Splitgate 1 peaked at, a little less than 68,000 players on Steam, significantly more than Splitgate 2's all-time peak. Usually, you want sequels to do better than the predecessors, especially when it comes to live services. In my last video surrounding this game, I discussed all of the marketing missteps, like how this dude came out with this Make FPS Great Again hat that, obviously had some political implications, combined with the fact that he dogged on Call of Duty and Halo on stage, presented himself as basically like the savior of the first-person shooter genre, only to deliver a product that, while cool with the way it integrates portals into a first-person shooter game, ultimately shipped a product that didn't deliver. Players of the first game felt that the second game didn't really fully capture what made the first game great. The developers did recognize the negative feedback surrounding Splitgate 2, so on July of 2025, just 3 months after its launch, they unlaunched the game, put it back into beta, and they essentially overhauled it into what has become Splitgate Arena Reloaded. But with player numbers being as low as they are at the launch of this reboot, things are not looking good for this live service. And even on platforms like Twitch, you'll find that viewership here is extremely low across all the streamers who have decided to stream this game. So activity and engagement of this title is pretty abysmal right now. Now, Splitgate development studio 1047 Games has become aware of kind of the negative outlook surrounding this live service, and all of the negative reports surrounding how its Steam numbers suggest that this game as a live service seems to be flopping. And they had something to say about that. And it's a statement that I ultimately think ended up doing more harm than good, with the development team low-key resenting the fact that Steam charts numbers are being reported on and highlighting how Steam charts don't measure fun. This is the first time I've ever seen a development studio respond to people discussing Steam charts numbers, with this tweet right here reading 1047 Games responds to recent Steam charts conversations. So I'm going to read this statement first and then express my take and opinions on this. Here's what 1047 Games had to say. Steam charts don't measure fun. They show one number on one platform at one given moment. They don't show the full picture of what it feels like to actually play, and they definitely don't capture the community that's actively helping shape what Arena Reloaded is becoming, including upcoming content like Arena Royale. Over the past 6 months, we rebuilt Splitgate from the ground up because we believe in the game, our team, and our community. The 1047 team remains committed to delivering the best version of Splitgate possible. To our amazing community, thank you. Your feedback and passion have helped make Arena Reloaded better every day. And to everyone who hasn't played yet, Arena Reloaded is free, the gameplay is the best it's ever been, and we'd love for you to jump in and form your own opinion. A lot of passionate people worked very hard on it. And look, I can appreciate that developers worked very hard on their game. I can appreciate that they listened to feedback to the point where they decided to overhaul a game that launched in a flawed state. And yeah, just because Steam charts numbers are low for a game doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be folks who find that game fun. But at the same time, Steam charts data and numbers do tell a story. And in the case of a game like Splitgate and the numbers that it's currently showing, what it displays is that it's a live service that is plain and simply not thriving. That's just the reality. We've seen numbers like these for other live service games who ultimately ended up flopping and shutting down when financial results came out. People aren't discussing Steam charts numbers just to dog on the game. They're discussing these numbers because they do foretell the most likely outcome for this live service, which is that it'll likely get shut down sooner rather than later if these numbers don't recover. The story that these numbers ultimately tell is that the game is not attracting the attention of a lot of players, and this major drop-off, not only for Splitgate 2, but also for Splitgate 1, which you can see right here, released to really significant player numbers and then dropped off very quickly, highlights what is an oversaturated market and how Splitgate ultimately is not winning over people compared to the competition. And competition in this market is incredibly stiff. I do appreciate that Splitgate is a bit more of a unique take on first-person shooter games with its portal mechanics integrated in there, but it doesn't change objective facts. And looking at these numbers, the objective fact is that people are more interested in playing other games than Splitgate Arena Reloaded. People are not flooding en masse to play this game. Even with its unique gimmicks and mechanics surrounding portals, it hasn't done enough to, capture audiences to a point where they would abandon the live services that they're already playing and that they've already invested significant amount of time and money in. They say right here that Steam charts show one number on one platform at one given moment. But I cannot imagine a scenario where Splitgate Arena Reloaded is doing far better on consoles than on PC. Usually, if you see big numbers on Steam charts, you can usually expect that similar big numbers are happening on other platforms. And conversely, if you see really low numbers on Steam charts, it tends to be that the game is not particularly popular on other platforms either. Steam charts ultimately show player numbers, and player numbers for a live service often defines its ultimate fate. Take, for example, Concord. This is a game that, during its free beta, only managed to achieve an all-time peak concurrent player number of 2,388 players. This was before the game fully released, but the writing was on the wall for this game at that point. It was impossible to see this game as a massive success when during a free beta, it pulled in so few players. Using the excuse of this is one number on one platform at one moment in time just wouldn't work here, wouldn't account for how low the player numbers are for this game. The reason player numbers were low is due to the fact that interest surrounding this game was minimal. And so yeah, when Concord actually came out charging $40 at that, it came as little to no surprise that the all-time peak was as abysmal as it was just a little under 700 players on Steam. If so few people are interested in playing this game for free, then of course, even less people would be interested in paying for it. And lo and behold, Concord ended up shutting down just 2 weeks after its launch, ended up issuing mass refunds across the board. The live service died, and Sony just decided to cut their losses, and the losses were significant, hundreds of millions with this game. All of that could be predicted just looking at Steam charts numbers, just looking at how many players are interested in the game and interacting with it. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got a game like Arc Raiders, whose all-time peak is not only tremendous with, just under 500,000 players all-time peak on Steam. There's also the fact that hundreds of thousands of players continue to come back. The retention here is incredible. The most recent 24-hour peak is 352,744 players, which is not that far off from its all-time peak. That right there is a healthy live service that will be around for many years to come. The statement here insists that Steam charts doesn't tell the full story, but in many ways, it kind of does. Clearly, there's an indication that this game isn't so fun and so far above and beyond what other live services do that it merits people abandoning the live services that are their go-tos in favor of this particular live service in this oversaturated market. This statement essentially attempts to minimize how much of a story Steam charts numbers tell, and it also attempts to minimize how important Steam charts numbers are for consumers, especially for a live service. Because keep in mind that live services are recurrently monetized. They often encourage you to invest money into its monetization schemes and elements so that you're able to attain certain unique rewards. Live services expect people to invest in money to purchase essentially zeros and ones, right? Like digital items that one day will disappear forever, and, are not products that you're genuinely going to own because they are all part of the video games ecosystem. So for people to feel comfortable dropping money into a live service recurrently and investing that much money into a live service game, they also have to feel confident that the live service will remain for the long term and that there isn't a possibility that people will invest all this money into a game that will die in the short-term future, which is the indication that Splitgate is currently showing through Steam charts. For live services especially, Steam charts allows people to gauge where a live service is headed. It allows people to gauge the potential longevity of a live service and in turn, whether it's worth investing money and time into this live service, whether it's something that will have enough longevity where your monetary investment will be something you'll be able to take advantage of for the long term, or if you're just throwing money away into a toilet that's about to flush. In the case of Splitgate here, what these numbers indicate is that maybe you want to hold off on spending money on the monetization schemes of this game because it seems likely that this game in the not so distant future will die off. Whereas when you look at Arc Raiders Steam charts numbers, what this indicates is that this is a healthy live service that'll be here for many, many years to come. And so if you invest money in the monetization systems of this game, then you'll be assured that at the very least, what you receive digitally will be something you can utilize within the confines of this game for many, many years to come, and not something that will go to waste, that will disappear in just a few short, days, weeks, or months. What Steam charts numbers indicate for a live service is whether it's worth investing time and money into it. The model for consumers is always make sure that your purchases are well informed. And what Steam Charts offers is essentially more information about a game that is enticing you to spend money on it. Steam Charts serves as a warning sign for whether a live service can be relied to stay online for the long term, or whether it's more likely that we'll see a live service shut down sooner rather than later, in which case, why would you want to spend money on such a live service? It'll save you money by being informed about how a live service is trending. That's why Steam Charts is important. That's why it's something that shouldn't be ignored. That's why it's something that people should look up, especially when it comes to live services. Steam Charts may not measure fun, but it does measure community sentiment and the viability of a live service. Steam Charts doesn't just show one number on one platform at one given moment. It shows a general trend, and that's consistently been the case. Anytime we've seen a live service have poor Steam Charts numbers, we've seen that live service die off unless a developer really stuck with it and really made such significant improvements that word of mouth spread and we saw a comeback happen, which is more of an exception than the norm. It's incredibly difficult to make a comeback from a poor first impression. And that's what happened with Splitgate 2. It made a poor first impression. They did overhaul it, but it may be a case of too little too late. Despite their best efforts, it may not have been enough to save this particular live service in such an oversaturated market. And maybe Steam Charts does kind of measure fun, because if you look at a game that launched at a peak of, 25,785 players, and that number drops off so quickly and then never picks back up again, maybe there's a general sentiment that the game isn't as fun as the developers think it is. Because if this was the most fun game in the world, then it would pull a lot of people off of the current games that they're playing, the current live services they're engaged in, and you would see a rise in player numbers. But the fact that we're not seeing that, and we're not seeing the level of retention that, say, Arc Raiders is seeing, maybe that does indicate that, a game like Arc Raiders is actually more fun for people than Splitgate. Splitgate does have a niche audience for whom, for those people, this game is their go-to. But for the general masses, clearly what Steam Charts is indicating here is that games like Arc Raiders are far more engaging for far more players than Splitgate, and that's just a reality. Whether you like it or not, numbers don't lie. They are mercilessly objective. I'm putting out a statement like this that tries to diminish conversations surrounding Steam Charts numbers. It's not bound to invite a whole lot of sympathy or a whole lot of rallying of support. While there are some people saying that Splitgate Arena Reloaded, like the rebooted version of Splitgate 2, is significantly better and harkens back more to the first game, which is what original fans wanted, there's also a general sense of are we supposed to feel bad for you? What kind of statement is this? Especially when Steam Charts do offer valuable data that can inform customers as to whether they want to spend time and money on a certain game. Prospects just aren't looking good for Splitgate, and it sucks that that's the case. I don't wish Splitgate Arena Reloaded ill. I don't wish any game ill. I want all games to be so freaking good that they become incredibly successful. But this is a competitive market, and no amount of defensiveness surrounding the Steam charts conversations will ultimately change the reality surrounding this particular live service, which is that, regardless of whether it's fun or not, it's just not doing well. Like, it's just going to die off because it costs money to maintain these servers. And this game, at the player base that it's retaining and seeing, it's not going to make enough money as a free-to-play game to make its money back to justify the cost of, maintaining this game. And that's always the danger of live services. It relies on recurrent monetization to break even on the recurrent costs and then to profit beyond that. But for that to happen, you need significant player numbers that Splitgate Arena Reloaded is plain and simply not seeing. These are the risks you run with a live service. These are the risks you run with like a poor PR marketing campaign. And these are the risks you run when you launch a game in a state that alienates your community and your fan base, and even overhauls don't always hit enough where it'll allow a game to make a comeback. And currently, that's how things are looking like for Splitgate Arena Reloaded, and Steam charts numbers say a lot on that front, whether they like it or not. Or at the very least, that's one man's take on Splitgate's response to discussions surrounding their Steam charts numbers and how poor they're looking. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on all of this in the comments below. Do you think the Splitgate developers were justified in making this statement, and do you think this was a good move? Or do you think this was something that ultimately did more harm than good? I'm more in the latter fence personally, but share your thoughts in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.